It was supposed to be just another early fall trip me, the lake, and the quiet hum of a small boat cutting across the glassy water. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the second, or resting beside mine. Or maybe it was the fact that Chris, my neighbor from across the street, was the one gripping it. I'd invited him on a whim, or at least that's what I told myself. The truth was, I'd been finding excuses to talk to him for months. Small things, like asking if he needed help carrying groceries when I could see he didn't, or offering up spare firewood even though I knew he had his own pile stacked higher than mine. Chris was calm, built like someone who didn't try to be strong, but just was broad shoulders, always in some old tee or flannel, boots that looked like they'd seen more trails than the highway. But what stuck with me, what kept me awake some nights, was the way he looked at people when they talked, like he was listening to every word, like he cared. I'd first met him when he moved in 6 months ago, after his folks passed, said he needed the space, needed air. We talked in shortwaves mornings, grabbing the paper, quick hellos across the driveway, nods at town hall meetings, but it never went deeper. Still, I watched the way he worked on his old truck, the way his hands moved with purpose. And yeah, maybe I watched too long sometimes. The idea for the trip came up when we crossed paths at the bait shop. I was stocking up for a quiet solo weekend on the water, just fishing, hiking, and sleeping under stars. When I mentioned it offhandedly, I caught something flicker across his face. Not quite longing, not quite hesitation. I've never really been out there, he said, thumbing the brim of his cap. Never hunted either. Then maybe it's time, I heard myself say. Now here, we were 2 grown men sharing a wooden boat in the middle of Juniper Lake, surrounded by pine and silence. Early October sunlight spilled through the branches like warm syrup, and the chill in the air hadn't quite stolen summer's memory yet. Chris sat across from me, one oar in hand, trying to match my rhythm. He was terrible at it. Our strokes kept falling out of sync and the boat spun slowly, almost in circles. But I didn't care. I liked watching him try. The way he furrowed his brow when he concentrated, the soft curse under his breath when the paddle splashed awkwardly. Guess I'm not made for rowing, he muttered, shaking his head. I smiled and leaned forward, showing him the grip. My hand touched his just for a moment, warm, rough, calloused. He didn't pull away. No, you just need to feel the water, I said, curling his fingers tighter around the handle. It's less about muscle, more about balance. He nodded, quietly. His eyes didn't move from mine right away. Then he looked down, let out a soft breath, and tried again. I watched him closely. Not because he needed help, but because I wanted to remember this. The way the sunlight lit the side of his jaw, the way his forearms tensed beneath rolled-up sleeves, the way something unspoken passed between us every time our eyes met for just a second too long. It wasn't about the trip anymore. Not for me. There was something in the air that I hadn't felt before, something in the way he sat with me in that small, creaking boat like it was the only place he wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, I'd let myself believe that this weekend would change something. Maybe it already had. I never really thought of us as friends, not in the traditional sense, more like neighbors who slowly forgot where the property line ended. At first it was just neighborly things. He helped me unload lumber once when my back was acting up. I helped him clear out his gutters when a storm clogged them with pine needles. He'd bring over leftover chili when he made too much. I'd hand him a 6-pack when I saw him tinkering under his hood too late in the evening. But over time, the lines blurred. He started showing up more, sitting on my porch without needing an invitation, talking about things beyond the weather or truck parts. He told me about his dad's hunting trips, how he never got to go, about his job in town of mechanics, gig he liked but didn't love. I talked about my own solitude, my reasons for choosing the woods over the noise of the city. Somehow, it was easier with him. I didn't have to explain the silences. We'd developed a rhythm, quiet but present, like knowing the other person's coffee order without ever asking, like recognizing the sound of their boots on gravel from across the fence. Out here on the lake, the closeness was more concentrated. No fences, no excuses. Did you ever think, he said that afternoon while we were setting up camp, that you'd be sharing a tent with a guy who can't even light a fire without looking like a complete idiot? You're getting better, I teased, tossing him a matchbook. Last time you almost set your boot on fire. This time it was just the grass. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Progress. Big progress. He smiled soft, boyish, and went back to crouching by the fire ring. I watched the curve of his shoulders, the way his shirt clung to his back, damp from effort. There was something incredibly grounding about his presence. Like he carried a kind of weight I didn't mind being pulled toward. As the sun lowered, gold brushing the lake, we unpacked the sleeping bags and realized something. There's only one bag here, he said, holding it up. No, I brought 2, I said, frowning. I stopped short. I remembered now. In my rush to grab everything from the garage, I'd only thrown in one, his, from the pile. Well, he said, lifting a brow, this is gonna be cozy. I'll sleep on the ground, I offered, suddenly warm under my hoodie. He stared at me for a moment, quiet. Don't be stupid. It'll get cold tonight. We'll just share. The word lingered longer than it needed to. I didn't reply right away. He added quickly, It's a big bag. We won't even touch. I nodded. Sure. Yeah, but even as we lay it out inside the tent and rolled out the pads, I knew we would, at some point. And the idea twisted something, tight in my stomach, nervous and electric. That night, after dinner, canned beans, grilled sausage, and way too many s'mores, we sat by the fire in the half-light, wrapped in flannel, and quiet. I never thought I'd like this, he said. This being out here, all the silence, the bugs, sleeping on the ground, but it feels kind of right. I glanced at him. He was staring into the fire, jaw tight like he was trying to talk himself into something. I know what you mean, I said softly. He didn't look at me, but he nodded. You ever feel like you don't quite fit? Even when people are nice, even when they mean well, it's like you're just off by a few degrees. My chest ached hearing him say it, because I knew exactly what he meant. I lived with that, feeling every day I wanted to say something then, something real, but I was afraid of what it would open up, afraid that once the door cracked, it wouldn't close again. Instead, I tossed another log on the fire and said, You're not off. Chris, you're just in the wrong place with the wrong people. He finally turned to me. Our eyes met, and I held it a moment longer than I should have. You think this is the right place? He asked, voice low. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. And the way he looked back, steady, searching, maybe. A little afraid, I told me he already knew. Later, when we crawled into the tent, we lay on our backs in silence. Our shoulders barely touching, but it felt like too much and not enough all at once. I stared at the tent ceiling, heart pounding. He shifted beside me. Our arms brushed. Sorry, he mumbled. It's fine. A beat. Thanks for bringing me, he said, his voice a whisper in the dark. I'm glad you came. I said back. He didn't respond, but I felt him closer after that. Not in inches, but in something else. Something quieter. Like maybe we were both waiting for something neither of us wanted to name yet. And I didn't sleep for hours. The next morning started like something out of a postcard, mist curling over the lake's surface, the trees mirrored in glassy water, birds calling through the pines. Chris stood at the edge of the dock, barefoot, sipping the coffee I'd made him. His hoodie hung loose on his frame, hair messy from sleep, and there was a stillness in him I rarely saw, but I couldn't enjoy it the way I wanted to, not with what I felt churning inside. Last night had messed me up. I'd lain there trying not to breathe too loud, aware of every inch between us and every inch where our bodies nearly touched. His arm had brushed mine more than once. I wasn't sure if it was accidental. I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be. Want to fish today? I asked, trying to ground myself. He turned to me, smiling faintly. Only if you don't laugh when I suck at it. No promises. He laughed softly and shoved my shoulder on. The way past that touch, just a friendly nudge, lingered more than it should have. We packed up a small tackle box and some sandwiches, then paddled out in the boat again. This time he was better with the oar still, a little uneven but steadier. I didn't correct him. I liked watching him figure it out. I liked the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, how he bit the corner of his lip when adjusting his grip. Up but halfway across the lake, the boat rocked sharply. I turned around. Whoa, what was that? Chris glanced over the side. I think we hit something. Then he cursed. *T. The oar just snapped. What? Sure enough, one of the oars floated, half submerged, a crack ran through it, completely split. Did I do that? He asked, sheepishly. It was old, I said, grabbing the remaining oar. It was bound to happen. We're kind of in the middle of the lake, though, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. I can row us back with one. It'll just be slow. He shifted toward me in the cramped boat. Let me help. There's only one oar, so let's use it together. The way he said it, so simple, so natural, knocked the air out of me. He scooted closer, thighs brushing mine. I handed him the oar, and together we tried to find a rhythm. Our hands overlapped. At first it was awkward. We bumped elbows. The oar splashed sideways. But after a few tries, something strange happened. We synced up. He adjusted slightly, angling his body behind me. His chest was close to my back now, and I could feel his breath on my neck. Warm, steady, not quite casual anymore. I think this is working, he said, voice soft in my ear. I swallowed hard. Yeah. The boat glided forward slowly. Each motion of the oar brought us closer to shore, but also closer to something else I couldn't define. Every time his hand slid forward with mine, every time our arms touched, I felt it. This unspoken thing between us. We were quiet for a long time. Just the creak of the wood, the lap of water, our shared breathing. You're really patient. You know that, he said after a while. What do you mean with me with all this? You didn't have to bring me out here, or teach me. I wanted to, I said, a little too quickly. He hesitated, then added, I'm not used to people wanting me around like that. That stopped me. I turned, just slightly. Our faces were close, no closer than before. His eyes were steady, but there was something raw in them, something unguarded. I like having you around, I said quietly. A lot more than I thought I would. The words hung between us. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, but the boat jolted suddenly, scraping against the bottom. We'd reached a small bank on the far side of the lake. More trees here, no path. A tiny inlet, no one used. Well, he said, pulling back slightly. Guess we're stopping here? We dragged the boat to shore and sat beneath the trees. The silence now was heavier, like the tension we'd both been avoiding had finally caught up. He leaned back on his hands, stretching his legs. You ever think about stuff you're not supposed to? I looked at him, like what? He didn't look at me when he said it. Like, what it would be like to kiss someone you weren't supposed to want. I froze. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. My heart started hammering. Yeah, I said, barely above a whisper. I think about that all the time. He looked at me then, fully, eyes narrowed slightly, searching. His gaze dropped to my lips just for a second, so fast I might have imagined it, but I didn't. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm probably reading too much into this. You're not. Silence. He shifted his weight. You sure? No, I said honestly, but I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel something. His face softened. Me either. We didn't kiss then. We didn't even touch, but the space between us felt charged, like a live wire humming in the grass. That night, back at camp, the air between us felt heavier, full of everything we hadn't said, and everything we'd almost said. We didn't talk about what happened on the water, not directly, but the way he looked at me, soft, unsure, open, said enough. When we got into the sleeping bag again, he didn't wait until I was asleep to shift closer. This time, he didn't say sorry when our legs brushed, and I didn't move away. We didn't speak much the next morning, not because anything was wrong, because too much had shifted, and neither of us knew where to place it yet. He offered me coffee in that familiar tin mug, his fingers brushing mine longer than they needed. He smiled, but it was thinner this time, like he was holding something in. I mirrored it, pretending it was just another morning in the woods, just two neighbors who happened to share a boat, a tent, a sleeping bag. But it wasn't just that anymore, and we both knew it. We spent the day walking a game trail deeper into the trees, our boots crunching over pine needles and cracked twigs. He walked ahead of me, humming under his breath, pausing to point out deer tracks or fallen antlers. His world was suddenly softer, more open, like whatever he'd said yesterday loosened something inside him. We reached a clearing by late afternoon. Sunlight spilled through branches, catching the dust in the air like gold. It was quiet except for the rustle of wind and the occasional bird call. I sat down on a fallen log, and Chris followed, tossing a pino cone between his hands. I was thinking, he said after a long pause, about what we talked about. My throat tightened. I didn't say anything. He looked at me. That wasn't nothing, right? I met his eyes. No, it wasn't. He exhaled, like he'd been holding that in all day, I figured. He let the pino cone drop and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. I've never said anything to anyone before, not like that, and I don't even know what it means, really. I just know I feel different around you. I swallowed hard. You don't have to explain. I want to, though, he said, eyes flicking to mine, because I've been carrying this weight around for years. Just not knowing where it fits, not knowing if it's okay to feel something and not be able to name it. I nodded slowly, heart thudding. I've always known. I was off the usual path, he said, his voice quieter now. Girls never made me feel like this, never kept me awake at night. But I told myself it was just a phase, or something I could outgrow. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I just hadn't met the right person to make me stop pretending. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out. I thought it was just me, I whispered. I've spent most of my life making peace with being alone, telling myself it was safer, easier. But then you moved in, and suddenly I couldn't stop looking for you. Couldn't stop hoping you'd show up at the fence or knock on my door. He turned toward me. I noticed that at first I thought you were just friendly. And then I realized I was waiting for you, too. The silence between us was different now. Heavy, but not frightening. Like standing on the edge of something important. I don't want to mess this up, I said. You're not, but I'm scared of what happens if we try. He looked down, rubbed his hands together. Me too. Then, softly, but I'm more scared of walking away from this without ever knowing. He reached out, slowly, and rested his hand on my knee. Just that. Warm, gentle, grounding. I didn't pull away. I keep thinking about that night in the tent, he said. How close we were, and how it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I've never felt that with anyone. Not once. Me either. His eyes lifted to mine again, steady now. Then maybe it's time we stop being afraid of what it could be. I stared at him, heart loud in my ears. My mouth was dry. My hands trembled slightly on my lap. You sure? I asked. No, he said, almost smiling. But I want to be. That was enough. I leaned in slowly, giving him every chance to pull back. But he didn't. He met me halfway. Our foreheads touched first, then noses. And then, finally, lips. The kiss was tentative at first. Careful. A question, but when he sighed into it, low and quiet and real, I felt something unspool in my chest, something I hadn't even realized I'd been holding on to for years. His hand came up to my jaw, fingers grazing the edge of my beard. My own hand found his chest, resting over the fabric of his hoodie where I could feel his heart beating just as fast as mine. We broke apart, barely an inch between us. His eyes were glassy, not from tears, but from whatever emotion had cracked open inside him. I've wanted to do that since the boat, he whispered. I've wanted it since the first time you smiled at me. I admitted. He leaned his forehead to mine, our breaths mingling. Now what? He asked. I smiled. Now we figure it out. He chuckled softly. You and me? In a small town? That'll turn heads. I don't care. He paused. I think I'm ready not to care either. We stayed like that for a long time, tangled up in the quiet. The clearing around us felt like another world untouched, safe, suspended in a moment that neither of us wanted to leave. Later, as we walked back to camp, his fingers brushed mine once, then stayed, not gripping, just resting there, easy, unspoken, real, and I realized I'd stopped feeling afraid. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I was sure of one thing, it had already begun. The world felt softer the next morning, like it had exhaled with us. Chris was already up when I opened my eyes, sitting just outside the tent, arms resting on his knees, hoodie half zipped. I could hear the chirp of birds echoing off the lake, and the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface. But what grounded me was the shape of his shoulders in the rising sun, and the way he turned the moment he felt me stir. Hey, he said, voice low, but lighter than I'd ever heard it. Hey, I echoed, rubbing my eyes as I sat up. You always wake up this early, only when I've got something worth waking up for. I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled like an idiot and crawled out next to him. We sat side by side, knees brushing slightly, watching the morning roll in like mist over the trees. For a while, we didn't need words. He bumped his shoulder into mine. You snore, by the way. I shot him a look. I do not. You do, he said, grinning, not loud, but it's there. Like a little bear cub. I laughed, shaking my head. Well, good to know. I'll work on that before we move in together. He raised an eyebrow. Wow, so we're already moving in together. Hey, you started it, I said, nudging him back. Calling me something worth waking up for. Feels like we skipped a few chapters. Chris chuckled, then looked at me, more serious now. I didn't mean to rush anything. It felt good to say it. You make me feel like I don't have to hide anymore. You don't, I said. Not from me. We packed up camp slowly, but there was no tension now, just this low, steady hum between us. Like we were in on something no one else in the world knew about. Back at the boat, we stood at the shore, eyeing the broken oar. Still think we can row this thing back with just one paddle? He asked. I shrugged. We did okay last time, as long as we worked together. He smiled, stepping into the boat and offering his hand. Then let's do it. One paddle, two idiots. What could go wrong? As we pushed off, I sat behind him this time, wrapping my arms around his to guide the oar. Our bodies moved in sync, and we didn't speak. But there was a quiet rhythm to it, like something natural had finally fallen into place. Halfway across the lake, he leaned his head back slightly. So, what happens next? I paused. You mean, after we get back? He nodded. I looked at the water, then at him. We take it slow. We don't owe anyone explanations. Not yet. We just keep showing up for each other, like we have been. He turned slightly so he could see me better. Even if people talk, they always will. But I'd rather deal with that than pretend this didn't happen. He was quiet for a beat, then nodded. Same. I let the paddle rest in the water. We'll figure it out. We don't need to know everything right now. I like that, he said, just being. I rested my chin lightly on his shoulder from behind. He didn't flinch, just let out a breath, and leaned back into me a little. When we reached the dock, he didn't step off right away. He just stood there, still in the boat, hand brushing mine, eyes scanning the woods like he wasn't quite ready to go home. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said, then looked at me. Better than okay. We unloaded the gear slowly, side by side, and when we finally walked back up the trail toward our trucks, he reached for my hand. Not urgently, not dramatically, just quietly, like he'd been waiting to do it, and I took it. Fingers interlaced. Two neighbors who didn't quite know what the future held but were finally brave enough to find out. It's been 3 weeks since the lake. Funny how time can feel both slow and fast at once. Like we've only just scratched the surface of something deep, and yet somehow, it feels like Chris has always been in my life in this way. Things haven't been dramatic. There were no grand announcements, no town gossip at least, none loud enough for us to care. We kept it simple. A few dinners on my porch, a walk by the creek that stretched into hours. And lately, he's been sleeping over more often than not. He still teases me about the one sleeping bag. You planned that, he says every time he throws an extra pillow on my bed. Totally, I reply. Calculated romance. He laughs and pulls me close. And just like that, everything is quiet again. Easy. Last weekend, we went back to Juniper Lake, not to hunt, not to fish, just to be. He drove this time. Brought coffee in a thermos and a pair of old binoculars. Said he wanted to look for hawks, though we both knew it wasn't really about the birds. We rowed together in a new rhythm. No broken oars, no tension, just silence, water, sky, and US. And today, he gave me something, nothing fancy. Just a small wooden handle he carved from the broken oar, sanded smooth, sealed and warm in my palm. On the underside he burned in 2 words with a wood burner. Still ours. Thought you should have the part that snapped, he said. You made it work anyway. I looked down at the handle. It fit perfectly in my hand. You know this is ridiculously sentimental, right? I teased. Yeah, he said, looking just a little nervous. but I meant it. I closed my fingers around it. So do I. It sits now on my windowsill, next to my keys, and the lighter we almost lost in the lake. Every time I look at it, I remember the moment we stopped paddling and just let the boat drift. The sun setting around us, his hand finding mine like it. Had always known where to go. We haven't defined anything yet. No labels, no declarations, but I don't need them. When he shows up at my door, lets himself in without knocking, tosses his jacket over my chair and says, "Hey, got any of that? Terrible coffee you make." I know Dot when he leans over the stove to kiss my cheek while I'm stirring soup, or when he falls asleep with his fingers curled around my wrist tie. No, Dot, this is real Dot, and it's only just starting. One night, a few days ago, we were lying in bed with the windows open. The breeze carried in the scent of cedar and woods. I was half asleep when he whispered, "You think this lasts?" I blinked awake. What? This us? Out here like this? I turned to face him. "I think it can." He nodded slowly, but he didn't look away. I wanted to. "Then, we'll make it," I said, brushing my thumb along his jaw. "Whatever comes next, we'll paddle through it together." He smiled at that soft, tired, but certain. And when he pressed his forehead to mine, I felt something settle in my chest. Not nerves, not fear. Peace. Love doesn't always show up in fireworks or declarations, shouted from rooftops. Sometimes it arrives like this, in the steady creak of a wooden boat, in the scent of pine, in a broken oar handle carved into a promise. And if you're lucky, it stays.